Jerome Powell finally cut interest rates, and here are a few reasons why you should care about that. The Fed cut interest rates by 25 basis points today, which is just a fancy way of saying 0.25%, but finance people say basis points because it makes them feel important. The Fed's funds rate is now 4 to 4.25%. Now, this wasn't really shocking. Everyone saw this coming, just like the Belly and Conrad thing, but there was something notable from this Fed meeting. In this meeting, we got the Fed dot plot, and they tell a very interesting story. This dot plot shows you where the 19 members of the Fed think interest rates should be at the end of each year. Most Fed officials think that interest rates should be between 3.5% and 3.75% by the end of this year. So that would imply we're getting 2 more rate cuts this year. And there was one member of the Fed that thinks that interest rates should be less than 3% by the end of this year. I got a feeling that was the newest member of the Fed, Stephen Miran, who was just appointed as Fed governor by President Trump. We all know what Trump thinks about interest rates. So why did the Fed finally decide to cut rates even though inflation has been more stubborn and more sticky than my 2-year-old son? Well, the Fed is worried about the weakening labor market. The jobs report lately have been shakier than my fantasy football team, with the latest revision showing nearly 1 million less jobs were added to the economy in the last year. So despite inflation being stuck at 3% and possibly getting worse because of tariffs, Jerome Powell and the Fed don't want the labor market conditions to get worse. So they're cutting rates to make borrowing money cheaper to help stimulate the economy and hope that businesses start hiring again. Will cutting rates lead to higher inflation? It's possible. Are we possibly headed for stagflation where inflation and the unemployment rate goes up? Yeah, maybe. But for now, with multiple rate cuts expected this year, you might see cheaper mortgages, car loans, credit card rates, and maybe even a bonus at work. Well, probably not the last part. Also, mortgages don't always go down when the Fed cuts interest rates, but I'll have to explain that on a separate video.